Hi, I'm Brett the Herbalist, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of Herbal Healing. Today we're discussing bloating and gas. So what I'm going to do today is share with you the symptoms, the causes, the treatments, the foods, the herbs, the things you can do to alleviate bloating and gas. Yes, some people do pass wind or fart too much, that's true. But actually passing wind and letting gas out of the body is a good thing. Even up to 25 times a day is healthy. But some people suffer with, in fact, up to 20% of people suffer with a condition called bloating and gas, which can be painful, uncomfortable, and quite distressing. And it's often related to specific food groups, and it's often correlated with some other intestinal imbalance or disorder. So what I'm going to do today is share with you the symptoms, the causes, the treatments, the foods, the herbs, the things you can do to alleviate bloating and gas. And we're going to go through this systematically so you can come up with a plan for yourself to eliminate the problem or help somebody else eliminate the problem if you're suffering with the byproducts of it. All right, so I'm going to share a page. There's a QR code in the top corner there that you can scan, and that'll take you to the page if you want to dig deeper and go back and read it over more thoroughly. Hi, I'm Brett the Herbalist, and welcome to another episode of Secrets of Herbal Healing. Today we're discussing bloating and gas. All right, let's get into it. So this could be quite a painful problem if you're suffering with it. Something that can be very sharp, stabbing pain. It can disturb your sleep. It can make you just feel like you don't want to go out or do anything. A really uncomfortable problem that can disrupt your life in a major way. But let's just talk about how it comes about, what's normal and what's not normal. I might have mentioned this in the intro. It's quite normal to pass wind up to 25 times a day. And not necessarily in huge amounts, but in pretty healthy amounts. And that's especially if you're having a fruit and vegetable diet, having good healthy foods, everything's working healthily in your body. So that's quite normal. The intestinal system contains normally a couple of hundred mils of gas at any given moment in time. And normal gas expulsion is 600 to 700 mils. So that's quite a bit of gas when you think about it. Healthy men pass about 14 times a day, especially after meals. And we're all probably quite familiar with, that dad problem as a kid. The major components of gas is nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, hydrogen, and methane. So methane is the stinky one. And sometimes you'll get sulfur as well combined with the methane if you have a lot of sulfur food. So not a nice smell. We're all familiar with that. About 74% of the gas comes from colonic bacterial fermentation. So that makes sense when you think about fermentation with the bacteria. It's similar to what happens when you brew things. You get a lot of gas production from that fermentation process. So that's quite normal. But when it becomes an issue is when you get bloating, discomfort, pressure and pain. Then you shouldn't have those things. Occasionally, if you've overeaten on certain foods, you can expect to have it. But when it becomes a problem, when bloating actually becomes a problem, gas and bloating, is when it meets the criteria of what they call the Rome criteria, which is a recurrent feeling of bloating or visible distension for at least 3 days a month. So that's probably getting it about once a week. If you have a real painful bloated gut once a week, you're probably suffering with chronic bloating and gas. Also, the symptoms should be around for about 6 months prior to diagnosis. The symptoms should be present for at least 3 months, and there should be insufficient criteria to call the diagnosis another intestinal disorder, such as irritable bowel syndrome, indigestion, acid reflux, or any other gastrointestinal disorder. So then you can say it's purely bloating and gas. So this is the Rome criteria for proper diagnosis of a condition, a bloating and gas disorder. And by the way, it's much more common in women. Women have about 19%, nearly 20%, whereas men are down around the 10%. So nearly twice as much, twice as common in women. So what causes the painful gas in the gut? And it's happening not in the stomach, not usually in the stomach, but further down in the digestive system, small intestine and colon. What we're going to talk about today is the things you can do around bloating and gas that's not necessarily related to these other conditions. And by the way, digestive disorders can be quite complex and cross over quite a lot. You'll find that there's one going on with another one going on at the same time. Usually, if you treat one, you'll help solve another one as a byproduct. It's important to know. I mean, if you do have irritable bowel syndrome and bloating and gas, and you treat the irritable bowel syndrome or the bloating and gas, you could actually resolve both. So it's an interesting thing with the digestive system in general. Obviously, indigestion, which is normally a lack of acid or a dysfunctional acid production in the body, wrong foods, chronic constipation, celiac disease, diverticulitis, and food and gluten and lactose intolerances can be behind that as well. Here's some of the foods that can cause bloating and gas, and this is interesting to look at because a lot of these foods are seen as quite healthy foods. I mean, a couple of these maybe not so much, but a lot of these are considered healthy, and it's often the way you cook these foods that makes them a problem. For example, raw brassica, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts. So if you have those raw, they can be a real issue. They are highly sulfur-rich foods, and that sulfur can be part of the gas component as it gets released into the body. Raw carrots, celery, and onions, again, sulfur-rich foods. So it's an interesting category altogether. Then we've got legumes, beans, chickpeas, dal, also if not well cooked. So you can cook these foods, but they not be cooked well enough because the lectins that are on these things are highly reactive in the gut and cause a lot of inflammation. And they can require a lot more breakdown in the gut if they're not cooked properly. So they'll hang around a lot longer and cause problems as they go further down through the gut, undigested or partially digested. So it's really important to cook your legumes really, really well, or your chickpeas, your lentils, your dal, all of those things. Cook them until they're super soft. So it's sometimes important to soak them before you cook them, even overnight. You're cooking chickpeas especially. Dals, not so much, but cook it until that's super soft. Nuts and seeds. Nuts and seeds are also very high in lectins. So these are protein components on the surface of the foods that your gut can react to, like have an immune response to, and that can cause a lot of inflammation. So that bloating can be inflammation of the gut itself, not so much gas. So you can easily confuse the two, bloating and gas. But they often happen simultaneously, and one and the other can both be behind the pain that you're feeling. Sugary drinks, dairy products, and wheat products. Well, sugary drinks feed the negative bacteria in your gut. So that can cause an imbalance of the microbiome. We'll talk about that a bit more in a moment. But the microbiome can be, when it's out of balance, can cause insufficient digestion because those bacteria that we talked about that do the fermentation of the food and break it down are responsible for digestion. So if you've got a lot of bad bacteria, if you're having too much sugar, you'll feed the bad bacteria. If you've had antibiotics, then you'll knock that out. Antibiotics, sugar, really bad combination for the gut microbiome. Dairy products and wheat products, you can become intolerant to these things over time, but you will find if you have a good gut health program that you can resolve the intolerances and those things you'll be able to eat them again. Again, you can reduce the gluten by having things like toast, for example, instead of soft bread. Wheat products, again, have anything with wheat well cooked to get rid of the gluten. Dairy products, probiotics, looking after the microbiome, you'll reduce the reaction to dairy products a lot as well. So that's a few tips there to help things go down. The gut microbiome, we spoke about a little bit already. So this is the bacteria in the gut that help, obviously, the gut microbiome to stay healthy, the good bacteria, but they help the gut immune function and the mucous membrane integrity. So the integrity of your gut lining, it's an immune part of your immune system. 80% of your immune system is in your gut and your gut lining. And that's the mucus lining of your gut. But like you've got in your lungs and your nose, you've got a mucus lining, which is part of your immune system. So we've really got to look after that gut microbiome. And it can be related to that inflammation. If you've got toxins going into the body in any kind, chemicals or foreign substances, your immune system in your gut's got to deal with those. And if it's not functioning properly, you'll end up with chronic inflammation and even an autoimmune response. And that can lead to things like Crohn's disease. So just important to know, look after the gut microbiome. And here's just a quick overview of the digestive tract. And it shows the things going in, belching and burping. So if gas is being produced in your stomach, like if you drink a lot of fizzy drink, you might get that. belching and burping. As you get these carbonated beverages, the CO2 will come back out. Or if you're gulping down your food or gulping down your drinks, you'll start swallowing air, so you'll get gas in the gut. That should come back out as belching. Occasionally it'll get through down into the gut, but it's unlikely. Most of the intestinal gas is from partially digested food that's getting too far down in the gut and causing a reaction. So there's the gas, there's the methane being produced. This is in the lower colon. Most of the gas and bloating is in this lower bowel area. That's why the flatulence, of course. Why these foods cause bloating and gas? Because they're incompletely digested in the small intestine, where they should be digested. And so if these foods are, there's also the fact that some foods are very indigestible themselves. So nuts, beans, legumes, we know those are largely meant to be indigestible foods. They're not easily digested. They take a lot of breakdown, so they require a lot of cooking. We've got the lactose intolerance, the fruit sugar, fructose. So fructose, added fructose is often used in sugary drinks, and that's the bad one. Sorbitol, these are chemical version of sugar, complex carbohydrates, and wheat. So these are commonly fermented into gas if they're not digested properly in the small intestine. Microbiome influences the type of gas, the volume of gas, and studies have shown a relationship between gas-producing bacteria and the experience of bloating. So it's quite closely connected to that microbiome. And again, there's those gases. But methane being the smelly one, carbon dioxide being the one that we take in a lot with carbonated beverages and drinks. And then nitrogen is the one that comes from these proteins, or these partially digested proteins. We talked about this a little bit earlier, that irritable bowel syndrome can be connected to bloating and gas. And that's because irritable bowel syndrome is quite closely connected to inflammation and imbalance of the microbiome and general issues with digestion. So there'll be a close correlation, and it's important to isolate irritable bowel syndrome. Normally with irritable bowel syndrome, you will have a combination of constipation and diarrhea fluctuating, and that can go on for months and months, and it's quite a pattern that seems to go on and on and on. There's no regular bowel motions. You will get a lot of pain with it as well. But like I was saying earlier, if you address bloating and gas, you will possibly address a lot of the causes of irritable bowel syndrome while you're at it. This is what we talked about earlier, where women may suffer more with bloating and gas because of emotional and stress-related factors. It's just a well-known thing that women do seem to suffer more with emotional stress, anxiety and depression and so on. So these things affect the digestive system and the gut function. So some of the things we can do to address that is massage, meditation, breathing exercises, and yoga, or any kind of mind-body relaxation techniques. They're always very, very helpful with anything related to digestion. And also what we mentioned earlier about the correlation between acid reflux, indigestion, bloating and gas. If your body is not digesting the food in the upper part of the digestive system properly, in the stomach, but that's the primary place for proteins to be broken down, then in fact, the proteins should sit in the gut for up to 6 or 10 hours even to be digested or broken down, mostly in the stomach before they go into the intestines. So if the food is being forced down into the intestines prior to that taking place, it's going to cause bloating and gas further down. So indigestion, it's really important to get good digestion. Make sure you've got good stomach acids, because protein requires a lot more acid. For example, carnivores can have up to 6 to 10 times the acid levels in their stomach as human beings, which indicates that we prefer plant-based food than meats, for example. So getting acid reflux under control, having a bit of lemon juice, cider vinegar, that sort of thing to help get that acid in the stomach working well. Enzymes can be really helpful, protein enzymes. So there's a bit of an overview of what's going on with bloating and gas, the immune system, the reflexes in the gut microbiome, gas accumulation and the way it's handled in the body, a sensitivity of the gut wall, reflexes, neurological reflexes, motility, constipation, so that's, things not getting through the body regularly. That's like an irritable bowel syndrome. Gender, sex and hormone stress, central nervous regulation, psychological factors. So all of those things are part of the picture. But what I want to do now is talk about the things we can do to address it. So let's get into it. So elimination diet is a good idea. You can eliminate the foods in a systematic way by removing the sugary foods, the fiber, the protein foods in that order, or you can just go on a detox cleanse diet where you eliminate everything right down to fresh fruits and vegetables, and you get rid of all the nuts and legumes, and you just start with a cleanse, and that helps to reset the whole system. And then you can do a reintroduction diet and phase things back in to find out what the culprits are and what foods are causing the problem. It's a really good way to do it. The FODMAP diet's also been shown to be helpful. And of course, FODMAPs are fermentable, poorly absorbed, short-chain carbohydrates, or FODMAPs. And you can do an elimination diet with FODMAPs as well. So if you want to dig into that, come and have a look at the page, and you can really get into a bit more detail on the FODMAP diets. But yeah, you can do an elimination 2 to 6 weeks, avoid all FODMAPs, and then reintroduce them over some coming weeks. Examples of some high FODMAP foods: wheat, garlic, onions, beans, lentils, apples, milk, honey, cauliflower, and cashews. They're some of the things we mentioned in the food groups above. And low FODMAP foods: fish, eggs, rice, quinoa. Most nuts and seeds, I probably would avoid those anyway if you've got bloating and gas, even though they're low FODMAP. Bananas, bell peppers, and carrots. So just a quick snapshot, but it's really good to go and have a proper look at the FODMAP diet if you want to try that. Avoiding lectins, nuts, beans, seeds, legumes, seeds, also things like pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds. A lot of people have too many of these things, thinking that they're healthy. And they are good nutrient foods. They're good high mineral foods, but good to have them in really low amounts, in real moderation, just a little sprinkle. You can get too heavy into beans and legumes if you're vegetarian or vegan, so you've got to be careful of that. I've seen a lot of vegans that suffer with a lot of bloating and gas because they have a huge amount of nuts, seeds, beans, and legumes, thinking they need a really high protein diet because they're vegan or vegetarian, which is not the case. You just don't need to add all that protein. Most plant-eating animals don't have a lot of those foods at all. So let's just go quickly through some of the foods that help reduce bloating and gas. So these are really good ones to start with: vegetable soups, stewed apples, cooked greens, soft cooked foods. You can do some fresh salad foods, but mostly having cooked foods is a good idea to start with. A detox diet we talked about a little bit earlier on. That's a full elimination diet followed by digestive herbs and foods that are known to reduce bloating and gas. And obviously that's something that we promote a lot as a reset and a reboot, and a good way to start any kind of gut health program. And some of the herbs we recommend include peppermint. So peppermint is very soothing, very calming, very relaxing, and it's well known for reducing bloating and gas. You can use it as a herbal tea, which is a really great way to do it. In fact, a lot of these you can use as a herbal tea. Fennel seed's another one. It's often used in Indian cuisine after eating, just to chew on fennel seeds, or caraway seeds are similar. They have a really good effect on reducing gas and helping the gas be eliminated from the gut, reducing inflammation in the gut. And then we've got the enzymes. So the pineapple contains bromelain, which is a fantastic protein digesting enzyme. So it'll help digest that protein in the stomach so it doesn't cause the bloating and gas further down. Same with papaya, pawpaw, they're all the same thing. But it's got the enzyme papain, which helps break down protein similar to the bromelain in the pineapple. Another protein digesting enzyme, kiwi fruit. Fantastic. You can have this. And people often say, oh, you shouldn't have, dessert after your food, that could cause indigestion. Well, it's the absolute opposite. Having, for example, pineapple, papaya, kiwi fruit, and even apples as a dessert, fruit salad basically, is really going to help you to digest your protein and really help your digestive process. So it's a really good thing to do, fruit salad dessert. Ginger root, it's good to, this is why you don't get indigestion if you have things like Thai food or Chinese food or Indian food that's got a lot of ginger in it, because the ginger helps you digest your food, and they quite often will have lemon and other digestive herbs in there as well. Licorice root. Licorice root is another great gut healing remedy, just for soothing and improving digestion and supporting that healthy gut microbiome. Any way you can get these herbs in would be helpful. We do supply a digestive support product which has got peppermint, fennel, pineapple, papaya, kiwi fruit, ginger, cayenne, and licorice. The cayenne is another great digestive herb as well. But these are just capsules. A lot of people will use these just as a quick, easy way to address bloating and gas if it's been a long-term problem. And just taking 4 capsules after your meals can help that food go down and digest smoothly. So there you go, a few tips and ideas on what you can do to reduce that bloating and gas. I hope that's given you a bit of an understanding on what causes it, what's going on behind the scenes, and what you can do to address it. And I hope that you can find solution and get resolution of your bloating and gas if it's a problem for you. Thanks for watching. Really looking forward to talking to you again about other digestive issues as we go through this series. Thanks a lot. Talk again soon.